It was a calm Sunday morning. The sky was clear, the roads were quiet, and everything felt peaceful. Judge Mariah Evans was driving her black sedan through a small town just outside the city. She had taken a weekend off. No courtroom, no files, no pressure. Just silence and air. She wore a simple black coat and glasses. Her face was calm, thoughtful. But that peace was about to break. As she passed a corner store, a police car started to follow her. She noticed it but didn't worry. She wasn't speeding. Her car was registered. Her license was clean. She kept driving. A minute later, blue lights flashed. The siren came on. Mariah slowly pulled over. She rolled down the window and placed both hands on the steering wheel, just like she had taught her son to do if stopped by police. 2 officers stepped out. Officer Daniels, tall and loud. Officer Cole, younger, silent, but watching closely. They approached her car. Daniels knocked on the window. "License and registration." Mariah nodded and calmly handed it over. He looked at it quickly and frowned. "You sure this car is yours?" Mariah raised an eyebrow. "Yes, everything's up to date." Daniels smirked. "Step out of the car, ma'am." "Can I ask why?" she asked politely. "You matched a description." "Suspicious vehicle." "Step out." Mariah took a breath. She had done nothing wrong. She knew her rights. Still, she opened the door and stepped out. Before she could say anything more, Cole grabbed her arms and cuffed her. "Hey!" she said. "This isn't necessary," Daniels said coldly. "You people always say that." Mariah looked at him. "You people?" He didn't reply. People passing by began to slow down. A woman across the street took out her phone and started recording. Mariah stood still, hands behind her back, not resisting. They pushed her into the police car. At the station, she was asked no questions. No lawyer was called. She was placed in a small room with a metal bench. 1 hour passed, then 2. No one spoke to her. Officer Cole walked by and peeked into the room. His face looked unsure. Then he walked away quickly. Inside the main office, Daniels was laughing with another officer. "Woman thinks she's somebody. You should have seen her face," he joked. Cole sat down quietly and opened the computer. He typed her name, Mariah Evans. Then he paused. His hands froze on the keyboard. He clicked again, and again. Photo popped up, Judge Mariah Evans, County Supreme Court. He stared at it. Daniels looked over. "What's wrong?" Cole turned the screen. Daniels leaned in. His face changed. The color drained from it. "Oh no," he whispered. In the holding room, Mariah sat calmly. The door opened. Daniels and Cole stepped in, looking nervous. Mariah stood up slowly. Daniels tried to speak. There seems to be a misunderstanding." Mariah looked straight at them and said, "There is no misunderstanding. You just arrested the judge assigned to your misconduct hearing next week." Silence. Cold silence. Daniels opened his mouth, but no words came out. Mariah stepped forward. "I gave you my ID. I followed the law. I was polite, but you looked at my skin, not my name." She walked past them, calm and strong. Before leaving, she turned back and said, "You made your choice. Now I'll make mine." In court. Outside, the woman with the phone was still waiting. "Ma'am, are you okay?" she asked. Mariah smiled gently. "Yes, but they won't be." That night, the video went viral. A black woman wrongly arrested. Calm, peaceful, but powerful. No one knew she was a judge. Not yet, but they were about to. After the shocking arrest, Judge Mariah Evans sat alone in her apartment that night. She wasn't angry. She was disappointed. She had worked her whole life to change the justice system. But today, the system reminded her how deep the problem still was. She looked out the window at the quiet street. Her thoughts drifted back to her past, back to where it all began. Mariah was born in a poor neighborhood in the South. Her mother, Gloria, worked 2 jobs. Her father had died when she was young. Life was not easy, but Gloria always said, "They can't take your mind, baby. Learn, grow, and never stop fighting." Mariah listened. She was always reading, books about law, justice, and great leaders like Thurgood Marshall and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. While other kids played, Mariah studied. Some called her strange. Some called her too smart for her place. But she kept going. At 17, she won a full scholarship to law school. When she walked into the first classroom, many people looked at her with surprise. She was one of the only black women in the entire program. Professors ignored her. Classmates looked past her. One even said, "Are you lost? This is law school, not a beauty salon." Mariah smiled and sat in the front row. She never answered with anger. She answered with results. In her second year, she won a major debate about police reform. The crowd clapped, but one professor pulled her aside later and said, "You make them uncomfortable. Don't expect a fair path." Mariah replied, "I'm not looking for a fair path. I'm making my own." After graduation, Mariah became a defense lawyer. She fought for people who had no voice, people who were poor, people who were wrongly accused, people who had given up. She won many hard cases, but she also lost a few, especially when facing biased judges or lazy officers. Every time she saw injustice, her fire grew stronger. Years later, Mariah became the youngest female judge in her district and the only black woman in that courtroom. Some lawyers doubted her, some officers avoided her, but one thing they couldn't ignore was her honor. She treated every person the same, rich or poor, black or white, officer or civilian. Her courtroom was quiet, fair, and powerful. People started saying, "If Judge Evans is hearing your case, you better come with the truth." That's why the arrest hit her hard. Not because they didn't recognize her, but because even with all her success, the officers only saw a black woman in a car. To them, she was a suspect, not a judge, not a human, just a problem. The next day, Mariah walked into her courtroom as usual. But something felt different. The same officers who had arrested her 2 days ago were now sitting at the back of the room. They looked small, nervous. They were there for a misconduct hearing. Their names, Officer Daniels and Officer Cole. Mariah sat on the bench, her black robe flowing, her face calm. She looked at the file in front of her. She had 2 choices. She could remove herself from the case, or she could stay and give them what they never gave her. A fair hearing. She took a deep breath. "This court is now in session," she said. The courtroom fell silent. The officer's lawyer stood and said quickly, "Your Honor, my clients didn't know who you were." Mariah held up her hand. "I know, that's the problem." She looked at Daniels. "Tell me, when I gave you my ID, did you check it?" Daniels looked down. "No, ma'am." "Why not?" He stayed silent. Then she turned to Cole. "Did you see anything wrong in the arrest?" Cole spoke softly. I didn't speak up. I should have. I'm sorry." Mariah stared at them both. "This hearing is not just about what you did to me," she said. "It's about how many others you've done it to." The whole room froze. She paused, then said, "I am not here to punish. I'm here to make sure this never happens again." The courtroom was quiet. Even the walls seemed to listen. That night, her face appeared on news channels across the country, not as a victim, but as a judge who stood for justice, even for those who hurt her. The video of her silent strength during the arrest had gone viral. Now, people knew her name. The courtroom was quiet, but the whole country was watching. Judge Mariah Evans sat high on the bench, calm and focused. Across from her sat the 2 officers, Daniels and Cole, the same men who had arrested her without cause. Now, they were no longer in control. Now, they were the ones under judgment. Outside the courthouse, reporters filled the streets. News headlines flashed everywhere. Black woman judge faces her own arresting officers in court. Justice turns around. She stayed silent. Now the truth speaks for her inside. Officer Daniels sat stiff in his chair. His hands were shaking. His lawyer had warned him. This isn't just a hearing, it's national news. One wrong word and you lose your badge. Officer Cole looked just as nervous. He kept glancing at the judge. She didn't look angry. She looked strong. That scared him more. Mariah looked at the evidence file again. Body cam footage, police reports, witness statements. Everything was there, and the facts were clear. They never asked her name properly. They ignored her. ID. They treated her like a criminal for no reason, all while she stayed calm and respectful. Mariah spoke. This is not just about me. This is about every person who gets judged by their skin, not their actions. Her voice was steady. The audience leaned in. She called the first witness, a bystander who had filmed the arrest. The woman said, "I saw them pull her out of the car roughly." She kept saying she was a judge, but they didn't listen. The video played on the courtroom screen, Mariah being handcuffed, her voice calm. "Please check my ID. I'm a judge. I work in this building." Officer Daniels replied on camera, "Yeah, and I'm the mayor." People in the courtroom gasped. Daniels closed his eyes in shame. Then Mariah called in a senior officer, Captain Harris. He had worked in the force for over 20 years. He looked at Daniels and Cole and said, "I trained both of them. They knew. Better. We teach every officer to check ID and stay calm. They failed." Officer Cole finally spoke up. "I made a mistake, Your Honor. I followed instead of thinking." "I should have said something," Mariah asked gently. "Why didn't you?" Cole looked down. "I was scared of being seen as weak or soft." Mariah replied, "Being quiet when wrong things happen isn't soft. It's dangerous." Then she turned to Officer Daniels. "Do you have anything to say?" Daniels stood slowly. He looked at her and said, "I judged you before I knew you." The next morning, the city felt different. It was as if the people had just woken up from a deep sleep. Everyone was talking about one thing, the judge who stood up against the officers who arrested her. News channels ran the story again and again. Social. Media was flooded with clips from the courtroom. Hashtags like "See Judge Mariah," "T Justice Turned," and "She Stood Alone" were trending across the country. In coffee shops, people whispered. At bus stops, strangers talked. Did you see how calm she stayed? She could have screamed or cursed, but she didn't. She didn't just fight for herself. She fought for all of us. At the police department, there was tension. Some officers supported Judge Mariah. Others stayed silent. A few were angry, not because she was wrong, but because their actions were now exposed. Captain Harris called for a full meeting. He stood in front of the room and said, "This is a wake-up call. If you wear this badge, you better respect every single person out there. No matter who they are." Some nodded. Some looked down. But no one spoke. Meanwhile, Judge Mariah sat alone in her chambers. She had just finished reading over 500 emails, some from people she had never met, some from young girls who said she gave them hope, some from other judges across the country who told her, "You were brave. You reminded us of what justice really means." But not all messages were kind. Some were angry, some full of hate. Some told her she should have just stayed quiet. Mariah sighed and closed her laptop. Her assistant, Jamie, walked in. "You okay, Judge?" Mariah smiled faintly. "I'm tired, Jamie, but I'm not done." Jamie nodded. "People are outside. They're gathering at the courthouse. They're holding signs for you." Mariah looked out the window. Across the street, a small crowd was forming. Some held posters that said, "We see you, Judge. One woman, one truth. Justice for all, not just for some." Later that day, the mayor called her. "Judge Evans, we've received pressure from both sides. Some want the officers fired now. Others say you're making it political." Mariah replied calmly, I'm not playing politics. I'm upholding the law. That's what I swore to do. The mayor sighed. We just want peace. Mariah responded, then let the truth lead, not fear. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels sat alone at home. He hadn't gone back to work. His phone buzzed with messages he didn't want to read. He saw headlines that mentioned his name. He saw clips of the arrest over and over again, and every time he hated what he saw. He looked at an old photo on the wall, him as a young officer, smiling, proud. He whispered to himself, "What happened to you?" Officer Cole, too, was struggling. His family was disappointed. His younger brother, who once looked up to him, now couldn't even speak to him. He wanted to apologize again. But how do you say sorry when the whole world already saw your mistake? Back at the courthouse, Mariah made a decision. She walked outside to speak to the crowd. Microphones pointed toward her, cameras turned on, but she didn't prepare a speech. She just spoke from her heart. I didn't ask for this to happen. I didn't plan for the cameras or the headlines. I just wanted to go home that night without being treated like a criminal. She paused. But now I see this is bigger than me. This is about fairness. This is about respect. This is about every person who walks down the street and feels fear, not because they did something wrong, but because they look a certain way. The crowd clapped. Some cried. Some shouted her name. She continued, "This city is watching. The world is watching. And now we must ask, what kind of place do we want this to be?" That night, news stations aired her speech. People in other cities started sharing their own stories. More judges spoke up. More police departments started reviews. It had begun. What started as one woman's quiet strength was now turning into something much bigger. But deep down, Mariah knew. This story wasn't over. Because real change takes more than just one case. It takes courage, truth, and sometimes pain. And pain was still coming. The next morning, something felt different in the air. Not everyone was celebrating. Judge Mariah's courage. Behind closed doors, powerful people were getting nervous. Emails were being sent. Calls were being made. Quiet meetings were happening. Some didn't like the attention she was getting. Some didn't like the truth she had spoken out loud. They were not going to stay quiet. Now, the system was getting ready to fight back. At the courthouse, Mariah's assistant, Jamie, walked in looking worried. "Judge, there's a report going around. They say you're being investigated." Mariah looked up, calm but serious. "Investigated? For what?" Jamie showed her the news on his tablet. "Sources say Judge Mariah Evans may have shown bias in recent court cases." Mariah sighed. She knew this wasn't about bias. It was about fear. That same day, a group of lawyers filed a formal complaint against her. They said she was too emotional in her courtroom speech. They said she used her position to create public drama. Some even said she brought shame to the justice system. It didn't make sense, but that didn't matter, because when powerful people feel threatened, they use the rules to silence you. In the evening, Mariah got a call. It was the Chief Justice of the state. "Mariah," the voice said, "this is bigger than you now. You're putting the whole court in the spotlight. Some of us think it's time you step away, for now." Mariah paused. "And if I don't?" There was silence. "Then," the voice said coldly, "then you may be removed." At home, Mariah sat quietly. Her heart was heavy, but her spirit was not broken. She looked at a photo on her wall, her graduation from law school. She remembered her mother's words that day. "They will try to break you, Mariah, but never forget who you are." The next morning, she received a letter. Notice of temporary suspension. Pending review, her courtroom was closed, her nameplate was removed. Just like that, the judge was silenced. But outside, the city wasn't quiet. People gathered again, this time in larger numbers. They didn't need signs. Their silence was their protest. They stood outside the courthouse, arms crossed, eyes forward. It was peaceful. but it was powerful. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels was watching the news from home. He saw what was happening to Mariah, and for the first time in days, he stood up, grabbed his coat, and said to himself, "This is not right." He went straight to the media. He gave a full interview, and in front of cameras, he spoke the truth. "Yes, I arrested her," he said. "Yes, I judged her because she was black, because she was a woman, because I thought I had the power." He looked down. And I was wrong. That clip went viral. People couldn't believe it. Some praised him, some hated him, but most respected him. Because admitting you're wrong in public takes real courage. Later that day, Officer Cole did the same. He also apologized. He also told the truth. He said, "She didn't shout. She didn't fight. But somehow, she made me feel smaller than I ever have, because I knew she was better than us that night." Now, pressure started to grow again. Why was Mariah being punished while the officers walked free? Why were truth-tellers silenced and rule-breakers protected? People began writing letters to the court. They started online petitions. Thousands signed. Even celebrities began speaking out. But inside the system, things moved slowly. Some judges still wanted her gone. Some said she was too loud, too bold, too public. But others began to quietly support her. They sent her private messages. "You spoke for all of us. Stay strong. We're with you." Mariah knew this was a test, not just for her, but for the entire justice system. Would it defend the truth or hide behind power? One evening, Jamie asked her, "Do you regret it, Judge?" Mariah looked out the window at the people still standing outside. She shook her head. "No, Jamie. I only regret not speaking sooner." A week passed. Judge Mariah Evans still had no courtroom, still no desk, still no robe. But outside the courthouse, people kept standing. Every single day. They didn't shout, they didn't fight, they just stood quietly, holding signs that said, "We see you, Judge. Truth is not a crime. Give her justice." Inside the courthouse, the final meeting was called. A special review board would decide if Mariah would keep her job or be removed forever. Mariah sat in a long, cold room. 7 board members faced her. Their faces were blank, their voices stiff. One of them read out the charges: public misconduct, emotional behavior, using the courtroom for personal revenge. Mariah stayed calm. She listened without blinking. Then they asked her to speak. This was her moment. The room went quiet. She stood up slowly. She looked each board member in the eye. Then she spoke in a clear, steady voice. "I was arrested for walking to my car, while black, while female, while wearing a hoodie. I stayed calm. I followed the law. I didn't raise my voice. But the moment they found out who I was, everything changed." She paused, then added, "If I had not been a judge, I would have spent that night in jail. Or worse." One board member shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. Mariah continued, "When I spoke in my courtroom the next day, I didn't do it for me. I did it for the women who look like me, for the young girls watching, for the ones too scared to speak." There was silence. Then the board asked, "Do you think you made a mistake?" Mariah looked down for a moment. Then she said, "Yes." Gasps echoed. But before anyone could speak, she added, "My mistake was thinking that justice lives only in books and rules. But justice starts with truth." One of the board members asked coldly, "Do you still believe you can be fair in your courtroom after what happened?" Mariah smiled slightly. "I believe I can be more fair, because now I understand what people feel when they stand before a judge who doesn't see them." Outside, news cameras waited. The crowd. Monday morning came. Judge Mariah Evans walked through the courthouse doors. But this time, people didn't ignore her. Security guards nodded with respect. Lawyers stood straighter. Some even clapped quietly as she passed. She wasn't just back. She was stronger than ever. When she entered her courtroom, everything felt different. The wooden bench, the quiet buzz of the room, even the sunlight coming through the windows felt warmer. Mariah took her seat. She looked down at the papers for her first case of the day. Her hand froze. The name on the file, Officer James Daniels. For a moment, she said nothing. Her heart beat louder. The same officer who arrested her for no reason, now standing in her courtroom, accused of doing the same thing to someone else. The courtroom door opened. Officer Daniels walked in uniform. But he looked different now. Not confident, not proud. He looked nervous, sweating, afraid. Mariah didn't look away. She watched him take his seat across the room. Then she began the hearing. The case was about a young man, black college student, stopped by Daniels for walking too fast near a store. The young man had no record, no weapon. He was simply going to buy food for his grandmother, but Daniels had pushed him, searched him, and taken him to jail. No reason, no warning, no apology. Mariah listened to every detail. She asked clear, sharp questions. Daniels kept his head down. He answered quietly. Sometimes he stuttered. Sometimes he had no answer at all. At the end of the hearing, Mariah looked at him and said, "Officer Daniel, do you remember?" "Me?" Daniels looked up slowly. His face turned pale. "Yes, Your Honor." Mariah's voice stayed calm. "I remember what you said that day. You looked me in the eye and called me a liar, a troublemaker, less than you. You didn't see a judge. You didn't see a person. You only saw what you wanted to see." Daniels opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The courtroom was silent. Then Mariah turned to the young man. She smiled gently. "You are seen. You are heard. And today you are believed." She paused, then looked at the courtroom. There is no justice without truth, and truth doesn't need a badge to be real. She gave the ruling. Officer Daniels was suspended without pay, and the case would move forward for further investigation. But something more important happened that day. People in the courtroom stood up. They clapped, not out of joy, but out of respect. Respect for a judge who chose truth over fear. Respect for a woman who turned pain into purpose. Later that evening, Mariah stood in front of a mirror in her office. She took off her robe and looked at herself, not just as a judge, not just as a black woman, but as someone who refused to be silent. Jamie walked in. "You okay?" Mariah nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." Outside the courthouse, someone left a small note on the steps. No name, no message, just 6 simple words. You didn't break. You rose. That night, as the news played her story across the country, little girls watched. So did mothers. So did teachers, workers, and even police officers. And somewhere in a small town, a young black girl whispered to herself, "One day, I'll be like her." And Mariah? She sat quietly in her office looking at the city lights. Her job wasn't just to give justice. Her job was to be the face of it. And now, everyone finally saw it.